Hello, my Maui and Xamarin friends. Thank you for joining me for a quick video today on implementing UI within Maui and Xamarin.Forms. Now, you must be getting excited because it is the end of Q1 2022 and Maui should be going into a release candidate any moment now. And there's no better time if you are interested in learning C# or .NET and you want to use those skills that you already have and utilize them in a mobile environment, then Maui will be your road forward. So today what I've done is really just reflected on some of the tools that I used when I started learning Xamarin.Forms a couple of years ago. And I'm going to share one of the resources with you that I found really useful. And this is a website that I will put in the link. And it's a website where I've downloaded this particular UI example from, and it's Snippets, which is a Xamarin.Forms UI snippets website, and it has some very useful UIs that you'll come across in any app development. So we have things like your carousels, your cards, your charts, your dashboards, and I utilize this for a lot of inspiration. So to see, if I've got a bit of a mind block of how a UI should look, and I'm worried about the possibilities or limitations within Xamarin.Forms, I come to this particular website just because it gives me inspiration. And I'd like, to share this with you so you can download a few of these and you can just play around, change the color, see if you can break it, see if you can change it to your style. So it's a great way to learn. And we're going to talk through one of those examples now. I should have just expanded, sorry. So this full credit to the UI has to go to this developer. And please, obviously, if you want to download his, it looks like he's actually doing some Flutter work at the moment, but he does all these um, UI kits from the looks of it. So very established developer. But I'm just going to go through this UI and just talk about how it's constructed and just really to bring this into what might be changing for Maui. So some of the UI elements here, because this UI was constructed a couple of years ago, some of it may not be required because Maui makes things a little bit easier for us. So firstly, I want to just have a look at what the actual overall outer shell of this UI is. So it's inside a scroll view. Now the scroll view is really useful, but you shouldn't use a scroll view. So this is a sort of a top tip for performance. You shouldn't use a scroll view around a collection view or a list view because they're already a scrolling mechanism built into them. So this is if you've got a stack layout and you're worried about the size of your UI being too big for the phone that a user might have. And what it means is that you don't need to worry about that because it makes the screen scrollable. So if there's content further down that can't be seen, the user can just scroll to it. So I do use scroll views. And then what we've got in here is a stack layout. Now the stack layout is probably just acting like an empty div, just to be able to put, yeah. So we've got two elements inside this stack layout. Now let's have a look at these elements that are in here. So let's move the outer layout out the way. So at the moment, we've gone past the scroll view. So we're inside and we've gone past the div. So we've not touched any UI yet. So then we've got a grid. Now this grid, because there's no specifications to row definitions or row definitions meaning your heights of your rows or column definitions. What I'm assuming this is probably to do some layering. Yeah. So if you look at this here, we've got the background image, which I imagine is this. So let's just change that to 100 and just see what happens if my hot reload works. Yeah, so that's the background image. Let's change it back to 200 and resave that. Now, so what you can do, because in MAUI now we have a Z-index tool, so we don't necessarily need to do this, but there's nothing wrong doing it like this. And what it's basically doing is it's creating a Z-index, if you will. So this grid, if you don't specify any rows or columns in it, now they'll just be on top of each other. So because this one came after, let me just do it that way and see if it changes it. No. Okay. So that doesn't affect it. Now on the new stuff, on the MAUI stuff, there is a sort of Z index sort of yeah, we can use. So that'll be good. That'll just clean up the UI a little bit there. And then we've got a stack layout, which means it's got two elements. So you'd only ever use a stack layout. Again, another sort of performance tip. You wouldn't use a stack layout for just one item, because there'd just be no point. You just have the item in the header. Um, so that's why we'd use a stack layout, just because it's got multiple components. So that stack layout is horizontal um, by default. Um, sorry, vertical by default, but we could change it to horizontal. So let me just have a look here. So this stack layout has margin left and right 20, and the top is 0. So if you wanted to give the margin a huge margin to the top, which should move it all the way down, then you could. Or to the bottom and move all the UI at the bottom down. I didn't move it down that much, it's just created a bit more of a space in here, which actually looks quite nice. It probably does need a little bit of margin at the bottom, I think, from what it was. So that's here, and it's got this great. Now, instead of putting margins on everything inside here, inside the stack layout, so if you were to do margin 10 all round here and 10 all round there, that's extra processing, extra rendering. So putting it all on the parent component is just a resource saving technique. So in there, so far we've got, now let's just get a snipping tool here, and let's just take a snippet of this. And so far we've got a stack layout. So this is all one element. Okay. So this is all sitting in this grid here. That is all sitting in the grid. And within that, we've got our image as a background. And because there's no row definitions or anything like that, it's creating like a Z index. And then what we've got is we've got a stack layout, which has got two components. We've missed one thing off here. So this actually, if we look here on the UI, there is actually another thing. This you won't see this in MAUI. This is a third-party plugin, which is a fantastic plugin because the only tool that we could use. See these nice curved edges on the actual UI, these rounded curved edges and a nice little shadow. That's this Pancake View, which is a plugin, a third-party tool, because it's got the ability to control the shadow and do a corner radius on every corner. Now we do have one which is called Frame, but it isn't. This one's the native one, which does a similar thing, but it just hasn't got as nice background controls. So we didn't necessarily need to use any plugins with Xamarin.Forms, but the actual Pancake View is really good. And I'm hoping, with it had loads and loads of aspects to it. Yeah, can't give the guy enough credit. Let me just see if I can find it. 1 second. Pancake View, Xamarin.Forms. Let's have a look at this. Right. Yeah, so it had all the gradient effects. Now, again, this comes in the box with MAUI. So, personally, as much as I love that plugin, I probably won't use it now with MAUI just because I'd rather keep everything native as much as possible, everything inside the box. So, we've changed one thing, and it hasn't really had any impact. Um, the frame has a shadow that you can set to true and false. It might be true by default because I can't see anything here. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. So if we look at our little drawing, actually, everything in the top section, so we've got the grid, we've got a stack layout that controls the this and this. So the SL for that and that, and the grid is everything inside of there. Now, what's actually happening is it's just if you look at this, how this you could you could potentially. Let me just have a look what happens if you were to put that inside. Maybe it breaks it, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. So you could actually put it all inside the stack layout, and I think that probably just sort of cleans it up in my eyes. I'd rather do that, and then I can perfectly see that actually there's this. I can see what this grid is doing now. You know, everything inside the stack layout is that, 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 and then the image is on a Z index because it's just how it works. If you don't put, they're both going into row 0. That's, you know, if that makes sense. Um, so let's move on. Now then what we've got is this corner effect, which is, I've just realized you've not liked or subscribed to this channel, have you? Come on, like and subscribe. Right, so what we've then got is again, this third-party plugin. So let's just change that to a frame. Now, this might not work anymore. Sorry, let me just change that to frame. I'm trying to break it as I go. So this is corner radius. Now, this is one of the benefits of um, the actual plugin because I don't think it's going to work how I want it to. So what it does is, you see here, it only lets you do all around. You can't go 0 top, 0 40 left, you know, like you do on your margins. Top, 40 left, and 0 bottom. It just doesn't like it like that. It just it so we do need to keep the, well, you don't actually, because on Maui we can use this. We can use this border control, which will give us the ability to specify. So if you look here on this example, they're all straight corners, aren't they? Apart from that one, which has got a 45 curve corner radius. So again, we won't need it in Maui, but that's what Maui is doing. It's sort of picking up the bits that they missed, that developers have wanted, that other developers have, you know, created extra tools to make. So essentially, this is just a frame or a container. This second half, we've done the top half, so that's just a grid. Let's move that out the way. So now we're focused on this bit here. So everything across here and down is where we are. So within here, we've got some margin top just to bring it down. We've got padding on the outer sides. Now padding is everything inside your frame. So let's just change this to a frame for argument's sake. It's just going to be easier for me, and I'll keep it at 40 all the way around. So, um, this is the padding is giving space to everything inside. Now I think that's quite a neat spacing, that 30 each side, but you could take all of it off and just put it, well, you do, I think frame, if you don't, stack layouts have, I think 20 padding by default. Frame doesn't appear to have any, but let's just see if it does have any default. Okay, so it looks like you don't need to set, there must be a default padding on the frame. So if you wanted to leave it at default, I would suggest you should for some performance improvements. So it might be worth you just having a look when you learn Xamarin.Forms, what the defaults are for frames and stack layouts and those sort of things, because one of the things that I learned was not to if there's a default value that you're setting, so if it's like stack layout as a default value 20 padding, don't type default, don't type padding 20, because it's a waste of a render cycle, because the UI, all those things that you specify in the label, for example, is being read. So even if it's default, it's being read. So we'll leave it like that. We just clean that up a little bit because we don't really need it, because I think the default padding is actually quite nice. And then what we've got in here, so this is like a nice curvy outer div. Okay, that's all it is. And then this is your actual content. So this is our grid at the top and our second element in the page, which is the frame. Now I changed it to a frame. Probably doesn't look as nice now, but so that's the original picture before I messed around with it. So, um, so what's inside? Now it looks like we've got stack layout with a label, and then underneath that is a grid, which is perfect. It is, because the stack layout is obviously linear, so and the grid, it's got two rows and two columns to create those four boxes. So if we look at this margin all around, stack layout must have some default item spacing as well, because there's a bit of spacing between these. And then let's have a look at this. So there are some nicer syntaxes, shortened syntaxes for the grid, but this is fine. It's quite readable to me. So one tip that they always say is don't use auto if possible, because then what the grid will do is measure everything within all the items within, and it takes longer for it to render. It's more calculation. So giving specific heights, so star star means 50-50, 50% either side, which I think is a good idea for this, because then no matter what size the screen is, it will always be 50-50, as opposed to this, though. This could be a problem if you ever used it on a tablet, because obviously a tablet's a huge UI, and I don't think it would scale very well on a tablet, this particular UI. I think it might look really small. The row definitions would be very small in a big tablet. Um, anyway, so what you've got here is essentially, you're saying we've got two rows, and we're giving a height to each one of them, and then we've got two columns, right? So, and the columns have got 50% each, and the rows have got 230 each. Okay, and then we've got these four items, and this one goes into grid row 0. So that is your 0, and it's also column 0, because it doesn't start at 1. So this would be 0, 0. Oops. Um, that looks like something else, but never mind. Right then, and this would be grid row 0 because we're still in the first row, but it would be column 1. Okay, so that's how that works. So grid row 0, column 0, and then this would be still in the row, um, but these are the columns. So column 0, column 1. Yeah. Anyway, terrible. Anyway, let's move on. So I've destroyed that picture. See, there's an entertainment value to these videos. Right. So I think we're pretty much done because all we've got inside these now, um, we've got these, uh, uh, we call them like frames, if you will. Okay. Each one of these has got the nice light shadow around, and it's got the nice corner radius, and then within it, it's just got a stack layout. Now, the reason again we're using a stack layout is because we've got 2 items that are going linearly down, and it's just the most basic of UI elements that you'd want to use in this situation. And then it's obviously just got an image, and we've got making the fonts. We're making the fonts bold, size 20. With regards to size, you can use these text descriptions as well. So you could say large. I'm not sure what size that large is, if it's much different. Now I prefer to use large. I prefer to use these if I can. And the reason being is when you're on a tablet, what it will do is it will scale this size up. So large on a phone might be 12 or 14, but on a tablet it might be 16. So it just helps with scaling. Um, so let me just change that one to small, and let's change this one to extra small or tiny. I think there's a tiny. No, there isn't. Micro. That's it. Okay. So now we've got tiny, tiny, micro. We've got small, and we've got, I think I used large. So that's the UI really. And if you managed to make it to the end of the video, thank you very much. I do appreciate it, and thank you for the likes and the comments. If you do have any questions, or there's any 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 aspects of Xamarin or MAUI you want to learn about, then please put them in the comments. And take care. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.